All right, let's hurry up and get this video done so that you guys can watch it before this entire team ends up on IR. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 11 team in my preseason power rankings. As today, we will take a deep dive into the San Francisco 49ers, a team that I genuinely believe, and I do not say this to be hyperbolic or oversell this team, they have the upside to be Super Bowl contenders and honestly to contend with the two juggernauts in their own division, the NFC West. But this team is also tightroping along just such a narrow razor's edge of a path that it's going to be riveting to see if they can get across it to the finish line or if they'll slip off and free fall towards the sharp rocks awaiting their death beneath their feet. I mean, this team is just so unique, and I'm excited today to go through every aspect of this team, talk about why that is, where their strengths and weaknesses, and what they'll need to go right to ultimately compete for a Super Bowl this year, and hopefully, if all goes well, get Kyle Shanahan that elusive first Super Bowl ring. Now, before we do get started, if you do enjoy today's video, or if you've enjoyed this series, if you could please do me a huge little favor, please take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy thing that really helps support this channel. It tells other NFL sickos and 49ers fans just like you to check out the video. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss now the remaining top 10 deep dives here. We are really getting up to it, man. That's exciting. The pedal to the metal grind to get this series done is on, baby. But let's go ahead and get started. As we do in this series, we go through every aspect of the team, through the roster, and start with the coaching staff. And with every segment there, we begin by taking a look at their offseason changes and ask the big question: did they get better, worse, or maybe stay the same at that spot? So with the 49ers and their coaching staff, everything is status quo for them, which means they're losing a coordinator. This team is so well coached that it's almost a given every offseason that they're going to lose at least their offensive or defensive coordinator in one offseason, and that was the case here as well. For the second time, losing Robert Saleh as their defensive coordinator. He goes to get his second run as a head coach with the Tennessee Titans, and he did a phenomenal job elevating a defense that desperately needed his talent. And they go and bring in Raheem Morris, who just lost his job as the Atlanta Falcons head coach. I don't think as highly of Raheem Morris as I do of Robert Saleh, simply put. I do see it as a downgrade with the coaching staff. We'll talk about Raheem Morris, but I think the hope is that at least the defensive roster should be better. And maybe in turn, the defense can still be better even without Robert Saleh, but at least from a coaching standpoint, got to look at this as probably their biggest downgrade that we'll see from their offseason here. Now, at least you still have Kyle Shanahan running this thing as this team's head coach, and obviously prominent offensive mind as well. The often duplicated, seldom replicated Kyle Shanahan here, who to me is still easily one of the best offensive minds in the league. Yes, Ben Johnson has given him a run for his money, who we broke down in the Bears deep dive. Sean McVay has done incredible things with the Rams as a Kyle Shanahan disciple, but Kyle's still got it, man, and we saw that last year. Mac Jones, no wide receivers, doing everything left and right around the sun to use Christian McCaffrey in creative ways to somehow get this team into the playoffs last year, which, I mean, between him and Robert Saleh on the defensive side of the ball, just a truly spectacular coaching effort. And it does continue to bother me that we just don't consider guys like Kyle Shanahan for Coach of the Year. Now, like last year was obviously a great year of Coach of the Year candidates, but I mean, what Kyle has been able to do for this team, it's remarkable, and that's why he is my second-ranked head coach. I know he gets some criticism for not having gone all the way and won a Super Bowl quite yet, and there's even been times where people have questioned, is he the right, CEO, leader of the organization type? I don't think he's a Jim Harbaugh or a prime Pete Carroll in that sense as like a elite leader of men type. I do think he holds his players accountable. I think he gets his team fired up. I think he's a good enough leader that it's not really a concern for me. And when you're that good in hand with being such an elite offensive mind, I'm going to take that 9 times out of 10. And obviously his system is a proven system. How many of these deep dives under that scheme category do we just write down Shanahan is the scheme? It all comes back to Kyle Shanahan, at least in a modern sense. Of course, Kyle has continued this legacy from his dad, Mike Shanahan. But 2/3 of the league are trying to replicate what Kyle Shanahan is attempting to do from an offensive approach standpoint for a reason. It works. It's a proven system. Kyle has that going for him as, I don't know, what would you call it? Like the second generation godfather of the system, something along those lines. But another thing you don't want to lose sight on with Kyle Shanahan as well is it's not just drawing stuff up on paper. I think Kyle is still probably the best play caller in the NFL. When you talk about that being a skill, I don't know that there is a coach in the NFL that you feel their pulse amidst the 11 players on the field on offense. I don't think there's a coach better in the league at being so finely attuned to, maybe it's the way a linebacker responds to motion, or understanding inside the mind of the opposing defensive coordinator and kind of having those predictive calls, understanding what coverage you're about to get and knowing exactly what button to push at the right time to break the defense, get those explosive plays out of it. Kyle Shanahan is so good too at just stemming together the same type of look. Usually it involves motion, but it can just be a formation at times too. And just seeing the way a defense is going to respond to kind of like bait, honestly, and then breaking something out that's going to break the back of the defense. It's so impressive to see him call a game. And to pair that with, yes, such a proven system, we know this thing is lethal. I don't know how much deep scheme talk is necessary in terms of like what Kyle Shanahan does. It's so well documented, so well covered, to the point that, you know, I know you guys know ball. It almost feels like an insult to sit here and spend 5 minutes talking about what the kind of schematic philosophy of a Kyle Shanahan offense is. But it is definitely that heavy dose of wide zone. The Niners were towards the top of the league still in wide zone usage last year. Almost 2 out of 5 plays were outside zone for them. But I think Kyle has even continued to evolve and get better at those changeup punches, whether it's counter, power, crack toss. He has everything in his back pocket that all kind of builds around the threat of that wide zone play action marriage, where everything is brought out to look the same, and often through heavy personnel. You'll so often hear people like myself say, marry the run and pass. It's really to put that front in a bind, where they can't go full commit against the run game, so it benefits your ability to assert yourself at the point of attack when you want to run the football. But it also tends to suck in the linebackers a little bit when you call play action. Then all of a sudden they think you're running wide zone. All of a sudden the quarterback turns around and you just dropped a crossing route to George Kittle over their head. It works for a reason, and that is essentially at the heart of it, the reason. And Kyle as well has, I think, continued to add to the different types of formations that he'll hit you with. At the root of what he learned from his dad, it was all heavy personnel, 12 personnel, 21 personnel, and Kyle Shanahan will absolutely lean into that quite heavily. We've seen some variations of this offense through the Sean McVay tree, especially try to do this system more from like 11 personnel, which is going to have 3 wide receivers on the field. Kyle still leans more towards 2 wide receiver packages, more heavy personnel, with a combination of 12, which is going to be 2 tight ends on the field, or 21 personnel as well, tapping into that versatility of a move fullback like a Kyle Juszczyk as well. But we've seen Kyle definitely tap into the Sean McVay blend of 11 personnel, or I like the term 11 and a half personnel, where you take a big slot wide receiver, which has been Juwan Jennings here, to kind of play half the role of that extra tight end, half the role of that more athletic wide receiver out there. Now Juwan Jennings is gone. Spoiler alert for the wide receiver offseason changes. We'll see if they maybe lean heavier into heavy personnel this year perhaps, but it's all in unison and balance with the design and really play calling of this offense. So shouldn't be a surprise to see the Niners rank just about at the top of the league in terms of offensive coach rankings, run game especially. I do view Kyle Shanahan as good as it gets from a run game design, keeping you on your toes as we described. First to second with an elite grade as a run game coach. The pass game design is top 4. We're not here to criticize Kyle Shanahan, but I do think there's other coaches that when you assess their drop back pass game designs, they probably bring even more to the table than like Kyle Shanahan, where Kyle's truly special within that early down systematic design of the offense and still very good as a drop back pass game designer. Now, you do have Clay Kubiak here, who it feels like it's only destiny that he follows his brother, who followed his dad before that, and goes on his own path at some point here on this long list of Shanahan McVay disciples that go on to probably be their own offensive coordinator first and then a head coach. It's possible Clay Kubiak just makes that jump up to the head coach ranks. If I was hiring Clay Kubiak, I would want to see him call plays himself first, but obviously it's all within the family there, and sometimes the nepotism stuff in the NFL can be bad. I think in the Shanahan Kubiak tree, it's pretty much proved to be pretty fair game in terms of, these guys being pretty tight knit and them working together. So I like that Clay is still here and his voice will contribute as well. Now we do have to flip over and talk about the defensive coaching, which I mentioned is, you're going to have some question marks that they're going to get the same elevation from their defensive coaching that you get from a Robert Saleh. I don't view Raheem Morris in that light, unfortunately. I like Raheem Morris. I think he's fine. I don't take any issue with him being their choice as the hire. I think he's more than qualified. He's kind of flirted between this line of being a defensive coordinator and head coach multiple times in his career at this point for a reason. He's really good at his job. And, defensive coach rankings for the Niners here, pretty close to the middle of the league, 18th to 22nd for pass defense coaching, 19th to 23rd in run defense coaching. Still solid, still enough to get the job done. But these are big shoes to fill from Robert Saleh, who I do think extremely high of. Whereas Morris, it's a little bit harder to look at kind of the jobs he's done, the schemes he's run, and think that he is really someone that truly elevates a defense as opposed to operates a defense. And perhaps I view Saleh as more of an engine that will drive a defense forward and faster than you would think is capable. Whereas I think Raheem Morris is pretty good at hopping in the driver's seat and taking the wheel and doing a pretty good job to get you home safe. You know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of the caliber of defensive mind that I think Raheem Morris is. And I think it's totally reasonable for the Niners to go with, in this case, more of a proven commodity, someone that's done it before, that's not going to sink the ship, than try to, headhunt for some ascending defensive mind that's going to be a little bit more volatile in that sense. Now, the one thing I will say about Raheem Morris is he's able to be extremely liquid. I would compare him to like a Ditto in Pokemon. I made another Ditto reference in this series. I can't remember who it was for, but that is maybe the best compliment you could give Raheem Morris as a defensive mind. Is he's been really good at, coaching inside a bunch of different coaching systems, going back to the Cover 2 days in Tampa, the Dan Quinn Seattle 3 defense in Atlanta. He's learned different systems, and this will now be the second time, in my opinion, that he'll be asked to essentially step in the shoes of a really great defensive mind and try to continue what they've been doing. And I think the grabbing the steering wheel analogy works here as well. And we saw this when Raheem Morris took over for Brandon Staley's defense with the Rams. We didn't necessarily know what sort of schematic influence Raheem Morris was going to try to implement to that Rams defense when he came in, given his diverse background working under all these different coaching trees. And most recently, he had been inside of that Seattle 3 system. But he really didn't change anything with the Rams. He just kind of did what they had been running there with that 3-4 off-zone style system. And then when he went to Atlanta, he ran the same thing. And the coordinators he hired ran the same thing. That's been a hot topic with Falcons fans, is that Falcons fans never wanted to blame him for it being his defense. And I get that they had other coordinators calling the defense in Atlanta, but explain why the system stayed the same from what he ran with the Rams from what they did in Atlanta. Obviously, there was an influence there in Atlanta with Raheem Morris implementing that system that he really learned with the Rams. Anyway, back to the Niners here. I'm expecting a repeat of that experience where, look, man, we've got the Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans coaching tree. We know what we like here. It works for us. It fits our players. Our scouts know what to look for inside this system. We want this defense. Well, they either looked around and didn't love their candidates to promote to defensive coordinator, whether that was internal or external. Chris Kachurik, who is a great defensive line coach who needs to be mentioned as a prominent defensive mind in this building, has been very clear that he doesn't want to be a defensive coordinator. But they were able to circle Raheem Morris, where there's a lot of familiarity within this coaching tree with Raheem Morris, and determine, he can come in and Raheem can continue what we've done here. That is my full expectations. And I didn't dig into if they've confirmed that that's going to be the plan. I would bet that they probably have somewhere, but to me, it just screams that would make so much sense that they're going to stay in that 4-2 Saleh system with Raheem Morris overseeing this thing. And the fact that you have Chris Kachurik to basically worry about the fronts and that structure with that wide 9 4-2 system that they run, a heavy emphasis on loops and twists and pass rush games, creating that idea that it's you're running into a hurricane, we're causing confusion, we're going to out-athlete you at the point of attack, and that's going to allow them to maybe be a little bit undersized and more athletic with their defensive linemen as well. The fact that Chris Kachurik is there and in charge of that defensive line, I think, is why they looked at a coach that historically has been a 3-4 structured defense, especially in the last 5 years, and say, you know what, Raheem, I think you can handle a different style front. You can come in and run this defense, which outside of that front 6 structure, the rest of the defense is actually eerily familiar, which also makes a ton of sense why they would circle Raheem Morris. If Chris Kachurik is handling the front, Raheem Morris is more worried about the actual play call and what coverage is on the back end. Well, this makes total sense. I had to create this little side-by-side graphic comparing the Falcons last year and the Niners last year. It's pretty eye-opening how all things considered, you're going to be hard-pressed to find two teams that were as close in terms of coverage calls as these two teams. Cover 3, almost identical. Both teams were top 8 in cover 3 and cover 4 usage, leaning into that off-zone mentality from those zone coverages especially. Both teams were bottom 8 in cover 2 usage, hardly using that. You did see a higher percentage of cover 6 with the Niners last year under Robert Saleh than under Raheem Morris, 11.5% for the Niners to 5.5% for the Falcons. And really the gap in about 5% there shows up in the Falcons' ability to run cover 1 man coverage, which the Niners just didn't have the horses to do it as often. Falcons had some pretty good corners last year. They ran it a little bit more often, 23% of the time. The Niners were at 18% of the time. I can almost guarantee you Robert Saleh would have liked to run a little bit more cover 1 if he had the healthy secondary to do it. So the coverage DNA of what Robert Saleh does and what Raheem Morris does is almost identical. And I think that's really fascinating and has to allude to why they liked Raheem Morris coming in here. Now, what will be interesting is the blitz rate. Raheem Morris got after it in Atlanta. They were third in blitz rate, kind of that like attacking 3-4 mentality up front. The Robert Saleh system is like, no, we're not going to blitz, and we're going to win with 4 up front, and we're going to do things schematically to still create numbers advantages while only rushing 4, whether that's stunts or walking guys up, using phantom pressures. So that will be interesting to see where they land with blitz rate. But the last thing I think I can kind of say here is as long as the Niners D-line is healthy, he's got a little bit more to work with here in San Francisco than Raheem Morris had in Atlanta. They blitzed that much because they had to. They did not have players that could win one-on-one reps in Atlanta, with all due respect to those young rookie edge rushers down there. So I would expect blitz rate will come down here for Raheem Morris as well. But definitely a fascinating hire. I think he'll do an okay job. I think there might be a little bit of a fear that this could be like a Steve Wilks situation where the Niners kind of did something similar to this when D'Amico left. Wilks, kind of that 3-4 background, clashed with Kyle Shanahan. It didn't work. The defense was not nearly as good. I think Morris has proven to be more liquid and adaptable and have a more diverse schematic background to be able to kind of ooze and soothe into this defensive infrastructure that is really good, as opposed to Steve Wilks that was a little, it clashed and conflicted a little bit more. So I think it was a good approach with the hire here and should work out okay, though I don't think he's going to be as good as Robert Saleh was. Very few defensive coaches are, man. So there is your coach and scheme segment. Now, before we get into this roster breakdown, I want to thank the sponsor for today's deep dive, and that is Prize Picks. You guys, the NFL preseason is upon us, and it's great that football's back, but these preseason games can drag on a little bit. But Prize Picks lineups will help you stay glued to your seat and interested in these preseason games all the way to the end. With Prize Picks lineups, you select more or less on any number of players' stats, so you got backup quarterbacks coming into the game. You can fill out a new lineup at halftime as they rotate into the backups, all of that. Compete for a chance to win some nice cash prizes there with Prize Picks lineups. They also have season-long options for the NFL as well. Right now, for me, some of my favorites are Ruben Bain to go more than basically 5.5 sacks. You guys know how I feel about Ruben Bain and that being such a draft steal. I think there's a lot of value there. Fading Byshal Tootin a little bit here. This one's going to be tight, but if my Chris Rodriguez overtaking a large part of that backfield prediction comes true, with Tootin being more of the third down option, I think he could stall just short of 724 rushing yards. It's not like the Jags have an amazing collection of run blockers either. And then a little bit more down the well-trodden path here with Bijan Robinson having a nice season, catching the ball, running the ball, 1,750 rush plus receiving yards. Those were a few season-long options I liked over on Prize Picks. If you sign up, use code HMA, and you can take advantage of Prize Picks' new offer as well, where they will give you $150 when you win your first $5 lineup. It's an exciting new offer out there right now. So again, that's code HMA. Huge thanks to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's deep dive. And let's go ahead and get into this 49ers roster now. So we'll start at quarterback, and no significant changes on paper with the roster, but we got to remember Brock Purdy got hurt last year. He missed about half the season. Getting him back healthy is an upgrade for this quarterback room, though, Mac Jones is still here and he played really well. And we're going to talk a little bit about Mac Jones, but we're going to start with Brock Purdy, who I like as a quarterback, man. I think he's really good. He comes in as my 14th overall quarterback heading into this season. And he gets a hard time because the system's been the system here. We've seen backup quarterbacks have success. Mac Jones steps in and plays well. Brock Purdy, 7th round pick. not the strongest arm. In fact, he almost certainly has the weakest arm among starting quarterbacks, I guess, depending who gets named the starter down there in Atlanta. But he gets a hard time for some of those things. I think Brock Purdy's a really good quarterback, dude. I think his processing, decision-making is top 10 at worst, probably closer to 5 than 10. I think he operates this system with urgency. There's a reason that this team couldn't stand the idea of Trey Lance, who just couldn't get the ball out on time, couldn't anticipate those throws over the middle of the field. That stuff matters, and Brock Purdy's really good at it. You do see him get in trouble with it at times, call it predetermined reads, call it being a little bit over-aggressive with what he think he's got, maybe trusting the system a little bit too much at times. He was 21st out of 26th in turnover-worthy play rate last year, not in a good way. He 6th highest turnover-worthy play rate. It's a ding, right? We're not talking about a top 5, top 10 quarterback here. He comes in 14th. You're going to have some things you can bring up with a guy and say it's not the best area of his game. Brock Purdy will put the ball in harm's way, and there's some games that can get pretty ugly for him if that's a dice roll, like when he's going to have bad decisions. Sometimes that can show up 2, 3, 4 times in a game. What was that? Was you have a Ravens primetime game like 2 years ago that was like atrocious, if my memory serves me right. So I think it's fair to bring that stuff up, but I still think he brings an ability to operate the structure of an offense that you're still hoping a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL will bring. Like, it is no problem him getting the ball out quick when you have a schemer like Kyle Shanahan that's going to create guys open at the second level in NFL open throws, not like wide open wide receivers, but like, yeah, you have a little window there to trust it and get it behind the linebacker, underneath the safety, throw the ball with the anticipation the receiver's going to get there. There's a lot of quarterbacks that struggle to make those throws and struggle to trust it. And you're going to get a hell of a lot more good on those types of throws than, yes, sometimes where he can put the ball in harm's way a little bit too much. I think the other thing you can bring up is like, yeah, the arm's a little more limited. The passing map, the number of throws you can ask of Brock Purdy is a little bit more limited. That defense can shrink down just a little bit more. If you're a curl flat defender, you don't really have to worry about him ripping a 20-yard deep out like you will with Drake May, who we just talked about in our last deep dive, or launching a go ball 60 yards down the sideline. I think it's an interesting pairing with Mike Evans, who's traditionally had like really strong-armed, good vertical throwers. Even Jameis Winston, like he's got his own problems, but like he could throw a go ball to Mike Evans. Tom Brady, great at it. Baker's very good at it. That's not really Brock Purdy's game. So like there's certainly some things you can bring up that lead to him being more 14th as a quarterback ranking here. But I do want to say, like, he doesn't get enough credit still for how good of a playmaker he is as well. This isn't Jimmy Garoppolo or Mac Jones or, a true definition of a system quarterback where you're like, oh, you're only as good as the design structure of the offense and the offensive line, and like you need the perfect surrounding type of deal. That's not the case with Brock Purdy. What is really special about him, honestly, is he is excellent out of structure. He is an explosive athlete. He gets out of the pocket and eludes sacks. He has excellent field vision on the move. Even if there are some throws that he can't physically make, he sees the windows to attempt throws that so many quarterbacks just don't process and take advantage of, these little throwing windows and opportunities that present themselves in scramble drills. So, you have at the end of the day a quarterback that will run Kyle's offense the way he wants it run. Yeah, maybe a tick too many turnovers, but not in a debilitating sense. Jimmy Garoppolo is worse in that category. Tua is an example of it being a debilitating amount. For example, Tua's turnover-worthy play rate was 5.5%. Brock Purdy, a good bit lower than that, 3.7%. But you get that floor of operating an impressive system that is in place here. And then the fact that he can go and make plays, and when you end up in 3rd and 10, and if Kyle doesn't press the right button or if the receivers can't win, Brock Purdy can create and elevate things for this offense at times. So I love that he's able to bring that to the table. And that's why I thought it was pretty silly that people were starting to entertain that, Mac Jones was going to take this job over and they were going to move on from Brock Purdy. Like, you saw some people saying that last year, and it's like, okay, it's cool that Mac Jones can come in here and run the system and do the thing we've seen a bunch of pocket passing quarterbacks do, but you can definitely feel the lack of that playmaking ability in those big third downs, and that's where a lot of the upside can come from. Just adding that extra layer to this Niners offense that can really piss off defenses. I mean, you finally stop everything Kyle Shanahan and this system is bringing to the table, and then Brock Purdy breaks a sack and rolls out and hits George Kittle, who's working with him in scramble drill, and you got to do it all over again. Like, that sucks. So we got to continue to give Brock Purdy credit for the playmaking ability he has. And I definitely think he's a good enough quarterback for the Niners with a good football team to win a Super Bowl with. We saw him not just knock at the door of winning a Super Bowl, we saw him a play away from winning the Super Bowl. And if Spencer Beerford doesn't get destroyed on, I can't remember the context exactly, but I think it was fourth down at the goal line in overtime or basically last play, last chance situation. Brock Purdy probably able to hit the open receiver in the end zone. But anyway, I'm a fan of Brock Purdy. I think 14th is a reasonable placement for him. I think there's a world where he climbs up a little bit. Some of his limitations are there with the physical tools for sure. I think if he could continue to get even better as a processor and as a decision maker, like, you got to remember he's still a young quarterback. If he can continue to cut that turnover-worthy play rate down further so that he's more like top half in the league, that's certainly going to help him push more towards top 10. But overall, I'm a Brock Purdy guy, I think. And I hope Niners fans are satisfied with the 14th ranking, because there's a lot of exciting quarterbacks in the league right now. All these guys got to land somewhere. But I don't like the idea of being low on Brock Purdy, because I don't feel like I am. I'm fully behind him being good enough to get the Niners to the promised land. And then, you just happen to have now the best backup quarterback in the NFL. I mean, it was either him or Malik Willis last year is the best backup. Now Willis is a starter. And hell, Mac Jones, if someone's starter goes down, we might see a Sam Bradford style trade where some desperate teams throws the Niners a second round pick for Mac Jones. I don't think any team was willing to give that much up for him this offseason, because he was in trade talks and rumors and stuff. But I think the Niners looked at it like, hey, we were super savvy to give Mac Jones a 2-year contract, knowing he'd probably play well here. He actually didn't become a free agent after playing well last year, which is typically what happens with these kind of journeyman guys that kind of go team to team, contract to contract. But he's here not just as one of the best backups in the league, but as far as veteran quarterbacks are concerned, he's cheap for a backup quarterback. Like, the good backups in the league, take like Tyson Bagent's new contract, for example, it's $5 million a year. Mac Jones makes $4 million a year. So the Niners are like, hey, we have a value contract. Brock Purdy, if there's a third weakness that you want to slap on him, it's that he has missed a few too many games for your liking. I debated calling Brock Purdy injury prone and putting the red medical cross on his graphic here. If it happens again this year, I think that's the point where we'll be, but he has been banged up in the past. The fact that you have Mac Jones to be able to step in and keep your season alive for 5 or 6 weeks like he did last year for $4 million, that's worth a lot more than a 4th round pick, probably more than a 3rd round pick for the Niners. But if some desperate team finds themselves in a pinch and they're willing to overpay to get Mac Jones, I think you might do that. But I think everything we said about a quarterback that can run the system, throw with anticipation, a true definition of the what you think of with a system quarterback, where if we're going to scheme guys NFL open, we just need a quarterback that can operate that system on time, throw the ball with accuracy, not to put the ball in harm's way too often. Mac Jones gives you that. And Mac even was arguably a tick better at that side of things than Brock Purdy by, maybe a percent or two, but he just doesn't give you the playmaking ability that Brock Purdy does. And even if it's a slight drop off, like ever so slight in terms of running the system efficiently, I want that added playmaking on third down in a Brock Purdy. I will give Mac Jones his credit, though. He's always had good pocket presence in terms of navigating pressure, buying time inside the pocket. He's not going to get out of the pocket and like destroy you with playmaking. He can do it occasionally. But he does have that nice kind of eye in the back of his head, sixth sense pocket presence that I like in a lot of quarterbacks. And I think Brock Purdy absolutely has that trait as well, by the way. So with that as a really good underrated trait for Mac, I will be curious, like, if there is another Mac Jones conversation someday with another team where he can get back into the starting ranks and be in that kind of like, you know, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield category of the former first round pick that returns to the starting ranks. That story might not be written for Mac Jones and his career quite yet. And obviously a potential trade scenario could open up that door pretty fast as well. But yeah, I don't feel the need to say that that's here with the Niners. Unless, like, yeah, if Brock Purdy has a serious injury again and Mac steps in and he's balling and he takes the Niners to the Super Bowl, there could be a conversation in that world. But I'm not about to predict that or open up that can of worms. At the end of the day, he is, I would say, the most prominent backup quarterback worthy of a conversation that we'll have in this series. And for now, for the Niners, they're happy to have that insurance policy in place. They do also have Adrian Martinez on this team, who was great in my XFL fantasy league that we did like 2 years ago because he runs everywhere. Not going to act like I've studied Adrian Martinez tape recently. I did find it fascinating. He's listed ahead of Curtis Rourke on their depth chart. Rourke was kind of a system quarterback style guy coming out of Indiana. Figured he made sense as a Niners backup as well here, just as that kind of Mac Jones pocket pass description, if you will. But yeah, there is your 49ers quarterback room, firmly in that tier 3 of quarterbacks right now with Brock Purdy, a guy that you can win a Super Bowl with as long as the infrastructure is really good around him. Maybe we reach a day where we really entertain like tier 2 conversations for Brock Purdy. I don't think it's impossible. I'm not necessarily putting the up arrow on him either, but I'm comfortable with where I'm at with Brock Purdy at this point in time. But if Purdy is more of a tier 3 quarterback, we know this surrounding cast is going to matter a lot. Let's start getting into the rest of the players on this offense. We're going to start at running back. So as far as their offseason changes, and if losing a coordinator each offseason is the status quo, as is spending a third-round pick on a running back that may or may not have been worth it, is status quo here in San Francisco. They draft Kalen Black. We'll talk a little more about him. I think of all the third-round running back picks they've made, he's not the worst. They do say goodbye to Brian Robinson, who they acquired right before the start of the season last year as a quality backup running back. I ultimately said neutral at running back. But I will say this, as we open up this page on the 49ers backfield, there is a chance that they are worse off at running back because I talked about that razor's edge that the Niners are on in the intro of this video. This is the first piece of the puzzle here where I'm terrified for the Niners' sake in terms of like what Christian McCaffrey's going to be this year. I really am. It kind of makes me think of, like, I mentioned this with the Patriots and Carlton Davis last deep dive, where it's like, dude, Carlton Davis was not the definition of like proven durability heading into last season. The Patriots managed to get 21 games from Carlton Davis. Sure enough, I post the deep dive, I check Twitter, and he's out with a hamstring injury. Like, Christian McCaffrey heading into last year was coming off of Achilles tendonitis. He's missed a lot of time throughout his career. He's now 30 years old. And one of the underrated spectacles of last year is that we headed into last season with those concerns on McCaffrey after 2024 was a nightmare, right? He was out in Germany getting God knows what done to him. And hey, maybe that was just miracle science doing its thing. And that'd be great if that's the case, and he's just going to be able to do this again next year. But one of the most underdiscussed, crazy, like unlikely outcomes of last season is not only that Christian McCaffrey got through the entire season healthy last year, he touched the ball almost 500 times, 337 carries and 113 receptions. That's an unbelievable workload. And it reminds me a little bit of what I said about Saquon in last year's Eagles deep dive, where it's like, dude, he touched the ball almost an exact same number, 482 times in 2024. And I was like, it's really hard to just pick up your feet and do that again the next year. And we saw Saquon not the same guy last year. And I think especially with McCaffrey's injury history, it's like, dude, I just am worried that he can be the impact on the Niners this season that he was last year. And the other thing too is we did see that, and this, I mean, Saquon was at least incredible in 2024. McCaffrey, he was still excellent, but he wasn't the same old McCaffrey in terms of efficiency. His production was largely volume-based, and in fact, some of his per-touch numbers are a little alarming and eye-opening here. He was 63rd out of 84 eligible running backs in missed tackle forced rate. He was 41st out of 50 backs in average yards after contact, and 44th out of 50 in yards per attempt. That's certainly not the level of dynamism and game-breaking ability that we really remember from Christian McCaffrey, I would say pre-Achilles tendonitis, pre-2024 season. So you pair the on-the-field regression with the risk of him and the workload he got last year. I do think Christian McCaffrey is probably the biggest individual regression candidate, whether you want to call it from a real on-the-football impact standpoint, statistical standpoint, fantasy football standpoint in the league. I don't hope that happens. I really, in fact, hope that it doesn't happen. I love watching Christian McCaffrey, but this is definitely our first example of that fearful tightrope along a razor's edge that the Niners are attempting to do this season, and it's absolutely something to keep an eye on. Now, I will also say this. That's kind of do you want the good news first or the bad news first? Well, I gave you the bad news first. The good news is this. Anytime I know I'm going to have maybe more of a contrarian opinion or a big stance on a player like this, as I just did with Christian McCaffrey at the end of the day, I always make sure to visit the tape and know that I'm going in like having watched what I watched, and that gives me the ability to at least stand here convicted in like what I saw, communicating that to you guys, the viewer. And before I watched, I was prepared to come in much harsher on Christian McCaffrey. In fact, my rating for the 49ers running back room actually went up after I did my tape watch on Christian McCaffrey, and I feel better about him just in terms of what he was doing on the field last year, because you look at what I was showing you there with the efficiency per touch. That's like not really a starting caliber running back with some of those efficiency numbers. Now, I'm still fearful for further physical regression, for durability concerns on McCaffrey, but I will say this. This dude's vision is so good, and it's always been good, but it maybe a little bit of this is like that veteran quarterback that's just, done every drop back against every coverage. McCaffrey has run every scheme so many times that he's just processing things at such a high level. Not that he's ever had anything close to bad vision, but it stood out to me in the tape watch. And maybe it's just because the last running back I watched, all their carries on was Travion Henderson. And I'll just say this, if you've got NFL Pro and you're trying to become a better scout, if you want to understand running back vision, what bad vision looks like and what elite vision looks like, do what I just did these last 4 days. Watch all of Travion Henderson's carries and then go watch Christian McCaffrey's carries. It takes like 30 minutes to get through it. Press the R button on NFL Pro. It'll take you to the next play. A little viewer's advice there. It will teach you so much about running back vision, and I want to give Christian McCaffrey his credit. Like his ability to press the hole, to explode into holes because he still has physical juice left in the tank, but because he knows where he's going and he doesn't hesitate. The ability to see these subtle little cutback lanes, and even if he doesn't have that old Christian McCaffrey, nasty juke to the outside, and then he's got the speed to break an angle, and then he's off to the races for 60 yards. I do think that was missing on his tape, but he's still able to turn a 6-yard run into a 12-yard run. And he can take a complicated blocking scheme or a muddied up look up front, find a window, and turn a carry that a lot of backs are going to get 2-3 yards on, and he'll find a way to get 6 to 10 on it. So he's absolutely still able to pair that elite trait with still excellent burst, excellent agility, and be a really effective running back. Reminds me a lot of, like, at this point, I would say like Aaron Jones. Like Christian McCaffrey has regressed in my opinion, but if you're regressing and I'm comparing you to like prime Aaron Jones, which is like a top 10 to 15 running back or so, that's a testament to how great Christian McCaffrey is at 30 years old, right? And I think that's fair. The dynamism, the missed tackles force, the explosive plays, missing a little bit more, and that was always with Aaron Jones. It was like great vision, great burst, great feet at the point of contact, leaves a little bit to be desired. And I think that's fair to say on Christian McCaffrey at this point. But based on what he was last year, that is still an excellent running back. But I am fearful for further regression and availability given the workload he got last year. So that's that like massive wild card, razor's thin edge piece here, at least for this backfield. There's more of them on this team as well. We're just going to have to wait and see where that goes. But obviously, with all that said, like I have the Niners ranked alone as the 15th ranked backfield in the league, with McCaffrey himself being in, I don't know, the 10 to 15 range, but they are also hurt by a severe lack of depth here, certainly a lack of proven depth. And if McCaffrey is going to be banged up, miss games, have to see more of a workload, what are you getting from these other guys? And we just don't know. I think you really have a pair of similar, later drafted young running backs here that are going to duke it out. And honestly, both these guys profile pretty similarly, Jordan James and Kalen Black. I lean Jordan James mostly because Kalen Black is behind the 8 ball, coming in as a rookie and had a bit of an injury. He's just getting back out there. I don't think they hate Jordan James. They just didn't have to use him much last year because they had Brian Robinson. Christian was healthy as he was. James is ahead of him on the depth chart while he didn't touch the ball much as a rookie because they had Christian McCaffrey, they had Brian Robinson. He's more familiar with the offense and the playbook, and being up to speed is just in his favor here. And I also wanted to, I was trying to remember, who was I higher on in the draft just from my own perspective? Because obviously, Kalen Black is a recent 3rd round pick. Jordan James is a 5th round pick from last year's draft. And it's funny, and this puts things in perspective with this recent draft class. Kalen Black was actually tied for my RB8 in this year's draft class, but he had a 5th round grade. Looking back at last year, Jordan James was my RB12, but a 3rd to a 4th round grade. And whatever about my actual, round grades on these players, but I definitely think that speaks to, I think take what round these guys were drafted in with a grain of salt. We know the Niners to begin with, they've taken 3rd round running backs and given the opportunity to someone else without blinking an eye. But also, last year's running back class was supremely deep, and Jordan James kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. Whereas this year, I think the Niners and anybody, you had to kind of reach a little bit if you liked any back in your style of choice in this draft class. So I wouldn't sweat so much that Black was a 3rd round pick and James was a 5th round pick. This is going to be a true position battle. And because Black is coming from behind a little bit with that injury, it's going to be tough, I think, for him to take this job from Jordan James. So I do lean Jordan James, but I would honestly say these guys are very similar styles. Neither the biggest guy, neither the fastest guy, but both absolutely in that contact balance, high-end vision-oriented runner. I would describe that as kind of the Kyren Williams archetype. And even after watching Christian McCaffrey, I think modern-day Christian McCaffrey is trending towards being more of that style archetype as well, where it's that vision and decision-making as a runner that really helps you stand out. And I think they're going to be able to assess both these guys and figure out who's got it at the NFL level and roll forward with a decent back between the two of them. It is, of course, entirely unproven. Black's a rookie, and Jordan James only got 7 touches last year in 2 games. But even if I'm optimistic that one of these guys will work out as a decent NFL back, I think both do lack like starting running back upside in an ideal world. Obviously, Kyren Williams is kind of the outlier there. Realistically, you're probably looking at like the Devin Singletons of the world as like even a good outcome for these types of backs. Long run, they're going to be backups, I think, but could be decent backups if the blocking is good, which it tends to be here in San Francisco. But they got to go out and prove it. They did sign Khalil Herbert, who's had a pretty steep fall off after threatening to be the Bears' starting running back at a point in time. Isaac Guerendo, one of the most wild discoveries I had on Twitter. I was tweeting about Isaac Guerendo, actually comparing him to Mike Washington, and then people were like, oh yeah? Well, is Mike Washington going to go date a porn star and fall out of order with the Niners coaching staff and start posting pictures of him looking fat on Instagram? Wild stuff, but yeah, I at this point, I'd be pretty surprised if Guerendo made this team. You also have Patrick Taylor, who's gotten carries in the NFL, Sincere McCormick, in the among others category, trying to maybe squeak out a roster spot here too. But yeah, it's not the most desirable backfield in the NFL. And then you should at least mention Debo is back. I don't know how much they want to use him in the backfield, how much he wants to be used in the backfield. There was potentially some disagreements on that. So we'll see. We know he can tote the rock from the backfield and be a piece. It's not like he has amazing vision to do it consistently in every run scheme, and he's not what he once was. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I wanted to at least throw him up there on the graphic and say he might get in the mix and help the backfield a little bit this year. But yeah, 15th at running back is the ranking as we head into this season. They could be a little bit better than that, depending on what version of Christian McCaffrey we get and how healthy he is. They could also be a lot worse than that. If we lose Christian McCaffrey here and these rookies, well, Jordan James and Kalen Black, basically rookies together, don't prove to be good, this could be the worst backfield in the league. It's not that hard to squint and see that happening here. Talk about a razor's edge, right? And that style of conversation absolutely continues into this group of pass catchers, as we'll see in a second. But let's look at the offseason changes here. And there's a lot of moving pieces. So as far as losses, this team did unfortunately lose Ricky Pearsall once again. I really hope he's able to get healthy at some point because he has looked really good. You can see why the Niners wanted to invest in him in the first round when he's on the field. But goodness, man, starting to feel like one of these guys that we talk about 5-6 years from now. And it's like, if you could wish one player would just stay healthy, who would it be? Feels like we're going to maybe throw Ricky Pearsall's name into those types of conversations. They do lose Jawan Jennings as well, which is a loss. I think he's a player that is kind of an unsung hero type for this team, and definitely going to hurt their ability to get into that 11.5 personnel style formation. They don't really have that type of guy anymore, so that's a loss. Kendrick Bourne as well goes to Arizona, so it's not nothing in terms of losses, but they do sign Mike Evans, who turns 33 years old here in a week. But he's still got it when he's on the field. They shock everybody as well by spending their first pick and the 33rd pick in the draft on Dejon Stribling. We mentioned Deebo Samuel is back, and they even added Christian Kirk as well. So a lot of big names coming into this room. And it definitely gets a little murky if you're asking whether this is better or worse compared to last year. I did say upgraded, especially because Ricky Pearsall, it's not like he played all of last year anyway because of those injury concerns. But this especially is where you can kind of open up that debate of like, are the 49ers a Super Bowl contender or are they a retirement home? They are dangerously close on the border between those two things. This is essentially an impossible group to rank. They came out 17th with an injury designated, like isolated ranking. Most of these units are kind of tiered off. The Niners kind of got their own individual rating, and that's where they landed. But I don't freaking know. This could be a top 10 group of weapons. It could be bottom 10. Let's get into it. Let's start with Mike Evans. I mean, we know what Mike Evans is, right? He's the prototype X. If you write a textbook about the different types of wide receiver archetypes and you write what an X wide receiver looks like, it'd be impossible to write that without talking about Mike Evans. Big, long, strong, underrated speed on the perimeter as well for go balls. And he's still shown that he can play at a high level. I think we've seen his body starting to break down a little bit. And honestly, the durability with him has started to become more of a question. The last 2 years, it just feels like he's starting to get banged up and miss more time than we've gotten accustomed to throughout his career. 2024, he missed about a month plus in the middle of the season, and last year it was multiple injuries. Just really struggled to stay on the field. Only played about 6 or 7 games. He had the collarbone injury in addition to a concussion, and that was suffered in his first game back after he missed a month with a hamstring strain. So hard to sit here and say it's definitely going to happen again, but it's got to be at the front of your mind. And that's a big part of why, like, his contract to come over here was not really anything substantial. A $3 or $42 million contract, only 14 guaranteed in that contract. So the concerns are there, right? But you think he can still play when he's out there. It's just a matter of, can he stay out there? And I don't think anyone's really got a different opinion than that on Mike Evans here. You can kind of see how this could work out. You can definitely see how this wouldn't work out, right? We're just going to have to wait and see which side of the coin this lands on for them. I do think from a team construction standpoint, if I'm the Niners, it's not the route I would have gone. It's almost a little bit arrogant from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan putting this team together. Like, you have all these different injury concerns and you add this to the mix as a piece that you're now depending on after your other injury risk, and Ricky Pearsall already unfortunately, came up red, if you will. Not to mention, I don't know that Mike Evans is like the ideal fit with Brock Purdy in a Shanahan style offense that's more about run after catch and crossing routes. They'll find a way to use him for sure. But I don't know. It was a weird signing that it was kind of a moment when they signed him, but it could work out for sure. So that's where we're starting. And that's already kind of a follow up to the Christian McCaffrey conversation we just had, who's obviously a critical part of their pass catching system as well. McCaffrey had 113 receptions last year. The next players down were George Kittle and Juwan Jennings at 58. So about double the next guy down. Not going to continue regurgitating my concerns about him able to sustain that, but he is part of the receiving entities here, and he's honestly at this point probably even more useful as a receiving entity than he is as the runner that he is. And I don't want to diminish that. I don't. I mean, not only can he be a mismatch problem, he's such a handful for linebackers. He is an excellent route runner, like the foot speed, the technique, it's all there. He's obviously a run after catch threat. But he also is 9 for 15 on contested catch targets last year. He can go to the corner of the end zone. And like he would still to this day be one of the best slot wide receivers in the NFL if that was his designated starting position. So he absolutely plays into it here. But you're definitely 2 for 2 as far as core pass catchers here that have major age regression and injury concerns. And then things start to get absurd when you know that the next guy we're going to talk about is George Kittle, who's unbelievable. He, to me, is still the best tight end in the NFL, with all due respect to Trey McBride, who might take that crown this year or sometime soon. But George Kittle, when he's healthy, is a dynamic mismatch problem, still very fast, great route runner. He's gotten better at that over the years. Wins tough catches. He's gotten better at that over the years. The last 2 years, you guys, George Kittle has converted 23 out of 31 contested catch targets. It's about 75%. That's unbelievable. He's one of the best ball runners in the league. His run after catch has taken a step back. We've seen his yards after the catch and missed tackles forced take a step down, but I think he's progressed in terms of route running and ball skills. The drops have also been reduced for him, so he's had a nice little trade-off there. And he's also kind of with a bullet the best run blocking tight end in the league. And that's especially where it's like, okay, if it's close between him and Trey McBride from a receiving aspect, or Brock Bowers for that matter, it's not even close from a blocking aspect. McBride's good at it, but George Kittle is phenomenal at it and a legitimate weapon for their run game. So yeah, George Kittle's the best tight end in the league and a huge asset for their pass catching as well. But he's 33 years old, coming back from an Achilles tear. Like, wow, man, it is wild when this stuff starts to stack up. Now, it is supposed to be like not a quote unquote bad Achilles tear. I guess it was in a spot in the ankle that you would prefer to tear your Achilles in. I guess that would probably be higher up, lower down. I don't know exactly, but that's what I remember hearing, is that they're very optimistic that he's making a full recovery. He's going to be out there week 1. I hope so. I mean, awesome. I'm praying for it. George Kittle's one of my favorite players in the league. I just swapped out the jersey in the back. I've had Kittle there for a long time here since we moved into the new studio. But I don't know, man. Like, how can you not be afraid of a 33-year-old tight end coming off an Achilles tear? That kind of speaks for itself. So your top 3 guys that we've talked about all have just like pretty glaring question marks in terms of age, health, and regression. And then, yeah, sure, let's fucking sign Deebo Samuel, because why not make this even more complicated? Yeah, Deebo has clearly regressed from being an offensive player of the year candidate inside this team. Not as fast, not as dynamic as a route runner and a down the field option. But I still think he had his moments on the Commanders last year, showing the run after catch ability, and he can win some tough catches. He gets a 77 rating for me, but it's tough. I think he is trending down. He is only 29 years old, so maybe there's some juice left in the tank, but he's not your typical wide receiver because of how they've used him. You know, he's literally gotten carries out of the backfield. So many of his touches here in San Francisco and a year in Washington are like physical, demanding, beat you up type of carries. And I feel like we've felt that wear and tear on his body. I think it's fun that he's back. I'm certainly happy that he's here after Ricky Pearsall gets hurt, because you just have another piece that you think you can count on. I don't think Deebo's just going to suck. I don't even necessarily think he's like super injury prone, though he's had some moments throughout his career where it's felt that way. I just don't know necessarily quite how dynamic he's going to be. I think he's just a nice, solid, good piece at the end of the day. Not necessarily going to make or break things here, but it is pretty funny that they just added another one of these regressing, aging pieces here. And he's not the only one. We'll come back to Dejon Stribling, but you got Demarcus Robinson is 32 years old himself. I talk about like textbook archetype roles. Demarcus Robinson is the like cookie cutter wide receiver 4. He's like a C plus to B minus across the board in like every wide receiver trait, nothing more, nothing less. He's got a nice clutch trait to him as well. I like him as depth, but he is getting up there in age. Christian Kirk as well turns 30 this year and has clearly regressed as he's battled injuries. It is so arrogant the way they have built this team, and maybe it works out, but I just cannot believe that outside of Dejon Stribling, and even Ricky Pearsall's had his kind of like durability problems, right? Outside of Dejon Stribling, it is like the Niners would like to pretend that they were able to just turn the injury setting off and that everything is going to be rainbows and butterflies here. It's like, dude, all these guys are trending in the wrong direction. Don't you want somebody else trending up? Now, they are hoping that guy will be Dejon Stribling. Very heavily invested in here. The 33rd pick in the draft was effectively their first rounder because they moved down from their first rounder to end up with him. And it was early, man. By all consensus accounts, betting against consensus is just very risky. And this opened up a whole can of worms. Like, it was like him and the Nate Borkircher pick opened up this whole can of worms this offseason about consensus boards and, you know, our team's okay to like go against the media consensus. Like, what does that mean? And all it is like average draft position, basically. And like, it's okay to go against that from time to time, but the Niners do it a lot. And like over time, your draft hit rate, and we have evidence of this at this point because we have a long history of consensus boards, drafting against it consistently over time will make you a worse drafter. And there is something to be said about that with this pick. I will also say, I like Dejon Stribling. I thought I was high on him with a 3rd round grade. There was weeks leading up to the draft where I was like, why is no one talking about Dejon Stribling? Like, he's pretty nice. He's big, fast, good, like hands down the field. Really turned it on in the college football playoffs. Like, he was a huge part of that Trinidad Chambliss run at the end of the season. Really good after the catch as well. I absolutely see why the Niners like him. And if there was inside information that someone was going to take him inside the top 50 and they traded down in the 1st round and target him at the top of the 2nd, there's been worse 49ers draft picks, I think, and I'm willing to give Dejon Stribling a chance, but he's got a lot to prove, and the Niners have a lot to prove that they know what they're doing here. You know, he has his issues in terms of like not the most productive college receiver in 5 years at 3 different programs. You know, 882 yards in 2024 was his career high. He's not a particularly like diverse route runner or anything like that. Like, there were knocks on him that to me made him more of a mid to late day 2 type of guy, not the first pick on day 2. But I could see it working out. You know, like, this is kind of the Niners thing, is they beat to their own drum in that front office. It's largely hurt them, but they've had their slam dunk hits as well. And I wouldn't be stunned if it was Stribling, but it's maybe, I don't know, slightly improbable. But I'm excited to see where it goes, and I can 100% see a world where the dust kind of settles with these injuries and regressing players, and the opportunity for Stribling starts to expand as the season progresses. And maybe we reach a point where he finishes really strong and can be a big impact here, both as a run after catch threat and getting down the field, adding some explosiveness in the vertical passing game as well. So that's where I land on him, and we'll just kind of see how he progresses here. So that's already 5 wide receivers. You do have Jacob Cowing, speed threat, coming back from injury, was unavailable last year. I'm not a big believer in him as a receiving threat, but he might be their prominent return man, which will probably cement him as the 6th roster spot there. Jordan Watkins also dealt with injuries. He was, I think, 5th round last year? 4th round, actually. He's got some vertical skills. Unproven. Gonna have to fight scratch and claw for opportunities here. Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. Kaderil Hodge, Trenton Irwin, a couple other old guys that have done it around the league. Going to be pretty tough to see them making this team. Usually at the end of these conversations, I can kind of tell you what the pecking order is going to be, how much I like one guy over another. This is a monsoon of trying to predict this thing. It really is. There's talent in this room. I will say that. I do got to talk about the backup tight ends because that could potentially matter if George Kittle suffers a setback here. Jake Tongas had to step in last year, and kind of nice, not gonna lie. Like, you talk about the Niners, like they might blow a 3rd round pick on freaking Cam Latu, but they'll find Jake Tongas out of nowhere as an undrafted pickup or whatever he was. Yeah, undrafted in 2023, and he might turn into a starting tight end. And that might be what Jake Tongas is looking like. I mean, there's stuff there. Like, he can get open. He can certainly make tough catches. He's showed to be a really good blocker here. I mean, he's one of the more intriguing tight end 2s in the league. I really like him, and I wouldn't be stunned if with a healthy George Kittle, we see even a heavier dose of true 12 personnel usage here. Now you also have Luke Farrell, who they kind of signed before Tongas like broke through and kind of took the tight end 2 job. So you kind of just end up with 2 good tight end 2s. They gave Farrell a lot of money, and they'd probably like to get out of it, but it would actually cost them more in dead cap than his actual cap hit if they were to release him this year, because they got a bunch of void years on him. So at this point, you know, they might as well keep him as one of the best tight end 3s in the league, just purely from a run blocking perspective. Really doesn't offer anything as a pass catcher, but they can come out in like all the heavy personnel you want. You can go 13 personnel. You could go 22 personnel with 2 tight ends and a Kyle Juszczyk as a fullback here. Like you have all of the heavy personnel options here. 3 tight ends and still one of the best fullbacks in the league. Kyle Juszczyk's a fun chess piece. There's some weeks where they'll scheme Kyle Juszczyk down the field and get some explosive plays out of him. I mean, yeah, sure, you got to mention Juszczyk there. And then you might even see one of these move blocking tight end pieces, Braden Willis and Josiah DeGuara, make it as more of a true F tight end mold. It's a really good tight end room, if not the best in the entire NFL. And I do hope George Kittle makes that full recovery that we're half anticipating he will this year. But deep breath, like genuine deep breath. Who the hell knows? Let's see where this thing lands. Now, as we go to the offensive line, it's a little bit more cut and dry. They did have a pretty significant swapping of like depth pieces this offseason. You say goodbye to Spencer Beerford, who did have to play about half their snaps last year as they sorted through some guard issues. Ben Barch, who actually played okay for them last year, but only in a few games. Matt Hennessy, likewise. Not the end of the world in terms of losses. As far as additions are concerned, they did add my biggest sleeper, hands down, in this entire draft class, Carver Willis in the 4th round. Love that. And then they kind of replenish all these other depth pieces. Brett Toth over from Philly, Vidarian Lowe over from New England, and Enrique Cruz out of Kansas in the 5th round as well. So I did say slightly upgraded because I am a huge Carver Willis guy. I might be the only person on planet Earth that would look at this list and say it's at least slightly better because I'm that high on Willis as a 4th round pick there. But let's get into this offensive line. They do rank 9th for me as we head into the season, but they are a little bit polarizing and split in the sense that they are 5th in run blocking, 16th to 21st in pass blocking. So still not bad as a pass blocking unit, but definitely stand out as a run block unit, and that's why they come in top 10. And this is definitely a group as well, before we even talk about the linemen, definitely a group where your combination of George Kittle, Jake Tongas, Kyle Juszczyk are going to help you pull away from some other offensive lines in a similar tier. And that's kind of a dividing factor that gets them top 5. But like I said, man, compared to that weapons group we just looked at, that still has me out of breath trying to navigate that room. It's much more cut and dry. Not that they don't have their question marks here, but it's a clearer path to understand what type of offensive line you're getting here. I would say probably the biggest true question mark is Trent Williams at left tackle, who turns 39 years old here in a week. I mean, no analysis needed, right? It's incredible that he's still doing this at this age. and still doing it at such a high level. I think we've seen regression. I don't think he's as much of an ass kicker as he once was in the run game. Still a top 3 to 5 run blocker in the league, though, because he's coming down from being in the conversation for who the best run blockers in the history of the NFL are. I don't think that's an overstatement. So he's coming down from that. Still, the biggest asset that this offensive line has is Trent Williams' run blocking. But you go from maybe elite, a combination of athleticism and strength, to just great combination of those two things, and it just hurts you a little bit. Pass blocking as well has continued to kind of, and Trent was maybe never a lockdown pass blocker. He's always been great at it, but you'll see him take his losses. It's getting to the point where he's more in the probably top 10 to 15 range as a pass blocking left tackle, as opposed to maybe top 6 to 10 where he's been here in his prime. It's just a matter of how much does he regress further at 39 years old? Does he stay healthy at that age? It's a lot to ask. It's a miracle what he's done to this point. So that's definitely an unknown, a wild card for sure. I'm relatively optimistic though that he's still going to be really good. Largely for me, it's if you're still a great player at 38, I think you can probably still be a great player at 39, even if you tick down a little bit. The biggest uncertainty from a talent standpoint is going to come at left guard there. I think they have a decent enough chance to kind of land the plane, if you will, with an okay weak link here between Connor Colby and Carver Willis. And I guess Robert Jones, it's kind of changing every day. They're trying to figure this out. It's a position battle. Literally yesterday when I built this graphic, Connor Colby was up there as a starter. Now Our Lads has Robert Jones in there. I think it's going to be an ongoing process. I think Carver Willis, being a rookie and a tackle at Washington, probably going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of winning this battle right away, even if he's the piece I'm most optimistic for long-term somewhere on this offensive line. I think that could just be the long-term Trent Williams replacement at left tackle. But I think they have enough options from a team that has perpetually had these pieces throughout the years. And maybe that's bias, I suppose. I would just say it's learning from history. It feels like almost every year there's a piece on the Niners offensive line where we're like, that could be a problem piece. And then he's just fine and eventually turns into a decent guy. There's a couple players still on this line. Jake Brendel, Colton McKivitz. At a point in time, we thought they were going to be liabilities. So I do trust them to figure this out. Obviously, you're going to circle that left guard spot and say, they got to figure it out. And it's, an area that is going to rate a little bit lower and hold the rankings back a little bit for sure. But I think there's reason to believe they'll solve it. To me, Connor Colby would probably be my bet to win this job for week 1. The Iowa experience translated. He was a good run blocker and started a handful of games last season. Not just a handful. He actually started 6 games. Now, the pass blocking was pretty brutal. Even in a system that can protect these guys in pass pro, he struggled with it. Didn't even grade out that well as a pass blocker at Iowa, and that's Iowa, who isn't known for their passing games. So, isolating him one-on-one in pass pro, it's hard to imagine that it's hard to be overly optimistic about it. You can develop it. He maybe gets better at it. We'll see. But I think they will like his run blocking. They run a ton of wide zone at Iowa, and he clearly was comfortable doing that right away. So you have a certain floor from a run blocking aspect, and then out of play action, that's more in line with your run blocking ability anyway. And then you just got to make sure you're double teaming with him as much as you can in pass pro to just kind of navigate it and survive it if you're going to have Connor Colby. So it's an okay floor. Robert Jones, to me, I think we saw what this looks like in Miami. He has started almost, I think, 2,000 snaps in his career, and it's admirable that he cracked a Mike McDaniel starting lineup as an undrafted pickup. He's big and strong, but he's not athletic. He struggles to connect on blocks. He gets his ass whooped in pass protection, to be honest. I understand how he's earning reps in camp, and maybe they go that route. I would be more concerned about that than the other two options here. I still think he could maybe be something short of okay-ish, to say the nicest thing I can about Robert Jones. And then Carver Willis, dude. Like let's just talk about him. I just fell in love with his tape, dude. When you're as a draft analyst, you go through all these day 3 offensive linemen, and it's pretty clear. It usually doesn't take long. It probably takes 30, 40 snaps with these guys, and you kind of get the point. You're like, okay, yeah, it's a consensus 6th round offensive lineman. Kind of looks like the rest of them. Something's either missing, whether it's the athleticism or the play strength or the awareness, and like he's missing blocks. You can usually tell what it is that makes the guy not very good. Carver Willis, on the other hand, just popped. And he was like one of the last guys I watched, and I was like, hold on. This guy's different. Like this guy, I ended up with a 2nd round grade on Carver Willis, and he was the guy for me in this draft class where I would have been banging the drum for Carver Willis. I wouldn't have drafted him in the 2nd round. For those on Patreon that followed my 7 round, what I would do mock drafts, I ended up taking him late 3rd, early 4th round, understanding the market and where you kind of had to draft this guy. And that's almost exactly where the Niners ended up pulling the trigger on him. He's athletic. He's got great technique as a run blocker. He is nasty. He screams what these Niners look for as a wide zone blocker. Just great targeting system, gets after it. He's got really good feet in pass pro. He does have shorter arms, and his anchor is going to be his biggest weakness. I don't think it's quite as bad as what Colton McKivitz was early in his career, but even Colton McKivitz would be a great mentor there for Carver Willis to just be like, where did you bulk up? What did you work on to make it so that anchor went from complete and utter liability to just serviceable? My prediction is that Carver Willis will become a franchise offensive lineman for the Niners. I would bet it says a left tackle after presumably Trent, he's going to be 40 next year. What are we talking about here? Is he going to go again in 2027? I don't know. But I feel like that's a good path for Carver Willis. That was his college position. But it could also be here at left guard, where I think his gameplay would absolutely translate. I think from a size profile, he could do it. I don't think his play strength is not so bad that he couldn't step inside and do that. And before I move on, the point I kept hitting on with him was he transferred from Kansas State to Washington, which is an offensive line factory. And he was dominating for the first 7 weeks of the season. Then he tears his MCL. That's the same thing that Will Campbell dealt with. And then he came back. We remember that. And Carver Willis came back after 3 weeks and started to rack up these pressures. The PFF grade comes down. People stop talking about him. The draft hype that he was maybe building for himself fell off a little bit. You can easily see the narrative that if he's pre-MCL tear Carver Willis, this would have been an absolute draft gem for everybody. He was for me. So I'll sit here and say, oh, I think that was a value in the 4th round. Oh, I think this guy could be a good value and a good role player. I want to separate draft picks I like, draft picks I love even, from draft picks that are the individual steal of the draft. I am putting I know it's scary to do, to have a big stance on a player like this. I am willing to risk he is one of the best value picks of this draft. It's something similar to when the Packers got Zach Tom in the 4th round for me, very close to that. I think Carver Willis could be someday something like a Zach Tom, a Luke Gedeke, a franchise tackle for this team in the 4th round. And that's why I do this as a draft analyst, to find these guys and bang the drum. I'll probably be wrong and regret having this segment. But I'm willing to stick my neck out and say how much I love this pick. So I don't know if it happens this year. It could, but I love the player. Love the pick. Fantastic job by a front office that I tend to be more critical of than giving rave reviews on. But you're definitely going to circle that left guard spot and say, we'll see how that plays out. Beyond that, Jake Brendel, really good veteran center, better run blocker than pass blocker, but he's kind of incrementally gotten better every year. I almost put the up arrow on him because that's been his trajectory for a long time now. But he is like 33 years old. So, in fact, he turns 34 here in a month. So hard to imagine that necessarily keeps happening, but he's a really solid piece. You got Dominique Pooney at right guard, another player that I think you could argue for an up arrow on him. Certainly, he's heading into year 3. I feel like he took a little bit of a step back in year 2. I think some of the concerns I had on him as a prospect where like his balance and falling off blocks kind of hurts him a little bit. He's big, strong, and has good get off, and he's a really good player. But I think in terms of down consistency, that could continue to hinder him a little bit, but like he's again, like very solid pass blocker, can struggle to match laterally and stay square in the drop back passing game at times, but the anchor's typically very good for him. And as a run blocker, he absolutely gets after it. He's a big asset for them there. I'm pretty comfortable saying Dominique Pooney is a good quality starting guard. Someone that pretty soon here probably going to get between $16-18 million a year and be a big asset for your offensive line. I don't know that he's necessarily going to climb too much beyond the ratings I put on him. Maybe some incremental improvements, but I did ultimately leave the green up arrow off of him just because I don't want to necessarily just put the green up arrow on every player that's a starter within the first couple of years. Like sometimes guys peak early and reach something close to their upside. That's kind of my take on Pooney, but I could be wrong. Colton McKivitz at right tackle also continues to get better every year. Same narrative with Jake Brendel. He's a little bit younger. He actually just turned 30 a couple days ago. Happy birthday, Colton. I think he's probably what he is at this point. I don't know. Like he still isn't the biggest guy, but he is athletic, and he's kind of like, at this point, what Mike McGlinchey was for them, where he absolutely gets after it in their run game. He can block any system for them. He's a true strength for them at right tackle in that sense. And he has done an excellent job at working around his pass blocking deficiencies, where he was like, I was calling for him to get benched here in San Francisco earlier in his career because he looked like a day 3 pick that couldn't pass protect. He's improved his technique. I think his anchor shows up less frequently as an issue. He's still going to struggle with those long arm power rushers, but he's a really good right tackle. And he got the big $3 or $45 million contract extension that at this point is like kind of looking like a half of value for him for how good he's been for this team. So from center to right tackle, you're feeling great about what you have. You shouldn't be too concerned about Trent at left tackle. It's really just like they got to figure out left guard in an infrastructure that has churned these guys out like clockwork. You put all that together, and I think you can see how you end up with our 9th ranked offensive line. We should probably mention some of this other depth. We've already gone 7 deep with these names, but Brett Toth was a really good center signing. If anything happened to Brendel, I think Brett Toth could be a really nice piece for this Niners team that's done a good job getting the most out of their centers. Jake Brendel, case in point. Look, Brendel's 34 years old. Last year of his deal. Brett Toth has never gotten an opportunity. He came out of Army, played the most last year that he's played in his career. Really held his own, filling in at center for the Eagles last year. And he's just under 30 years old. Would not be afraid to call my shot a little bit and say, Brett Toth could be this team's starting center next year. They'd have to re-sign him. It was just a 1-year, $2.5 million signing here. But I think that was a really savvy signing here as well that really cements some good depth. He also has played some guard. Definitely felt like center was the best he's played. And I wouldn't be stunned if the Niners are like trying to kind of keep this as their little hidden secret, kind of planning ahead a little bit with Brendel getting so far up there in age, coming up on a contract. So I don't know how much they're counting on him there or how much they even like him at the end of the day, but it's more good depth in my opinion. Enrique Cruz was a 5th-round pick for this team, athletic. I didn't get to his tape, and they've had success going to the cans as well, but he was a little bit further down on your sort of consensus rankings and stuff. So I didn't get to him. You like the athletic profile, though. You'll see what they have there. You have a low-end swing tackle in Vidarian Lowe. You don't want him out there, but it's one of those cases where, like, is he good? No, but if you contextualize how bad the average backup tackle is, he's a lot better than that. So you understand bringing him in when you have a 39-year-old left tackle there in Trent Williams. I mean, that's 10 deep. Nick Zakelj, they drafted. He's played a little bit. I mean, that's got to be about it, right, in terms of guys actually making this team. But, man, as far as offensive line depth goes, they're actually in a pretty decent spot here, in my opinion. So that rounds out the 49ers' mysterious, old, aging, injury-prone offense. Doing my best shot to rank them as a week 1 projection here. They came out as my 6th ranked offense, really highlighted by the 4th ranked run game, led by Kyle Shanahan scheming a top 5 group of run blockers, especially with all those different skill players that they have. Kittle, Tonjes, Juszczyk, still Christian McCaffrey back there doing his thing. The passing game ranked 15th with questions galore, and their range there is much more vast. But at the end of the day, still a lot of reason to be excited about this Niners offense being a driving force for this team. And if they hit their green lights, this can be one of the best offenses in the league. We've seen them reach those heights with Brock Purdy and Shanahan here. But I definitely think it's fair to say there's a little bit of an arrogant approach, especially given how things have gone with injuries with this team over the last couple of years. Potentially an arrogant approach with the roster construction of this offense, just assuming it's all going to go well again. That's the definitive X factor wild card for this team, is how healthy are these guys? How much do old players regress? Because there's a lot of them. There really are. But let's flip over to the defensive side of things, because there are some questions to be had here as well, and even a slight continuation of your injury concern question marks. And we'll start up front with their defensive line, a pretty hefty list of offseason changes, but I did ultimately say upgraded from this offseason, both on the interior and on the edge. So that's an exciting start here. If you want to talk about the roster talent being in a better place here this year to compensate for the loss of Saleh, the front here is absolutely a good start. So you really lose nothing on the interior. Never been a Jordan Elliott fan. He's gone. Kalia Davis had to play 42% of snaps last year, and it wasn't pretty. They go and get Osa Odigizua from the Cowboys. Probably their biggest addition. Mike Evans, is going to stand out to you. But Osa Odigizua, really nice piece to add. I don't really know why the Cowboy, I guess cap, but that's a loss for Dallas and a big addition for the Niners, who were hurting and are still hurting outside of them on the interior of the D-line. But they draft Grayson Halton as well in the 4th round. Another interesting piece to get into here. So upgraded at interior, and then at edge, they weren't without their losses. Bryce Huff does go and retire. He has some really commendable goals as an anthropologist now. Love Bryce Huff. He is, to this day, I think the only NFL player, although I guess not anymore, rip, NFL player that follows me on Twitter, because I loved him so much coming out and was crying about him not getting a combine invite, and he was like, preach. But yeah, great year for great career for an undrafted free agent in Bryce Huff. And is a loss. He was the best thing they had from a pass rushing perspective last season. Not so much in terms of Yetur Gross-Matos and Clelin Ferrell. But the bad man is back. Nick Bosa, who tore his ACL in week 3, as far as biggest addition, period, factoring in guys coming back from injuries, he's going to be the biggest guy you circle there in terms of impact. Although Fred Warner too, but getting that superstar pass rusher back, big deal here. Their 1st round pick from last year too, Mykel Williams, gets put back into the equation here after he got hurt about a third of the way through the year. Romello Height is a third-round pick as well that they drafted, and then they also sign the veteran Agbanya Okoronkwo. So a lot of additions there, and I said upgraded at edge. Now let's get into this defensive line. They aren't clean through the woods to be back to the glory days of some of those amazing 49ers D-lines of a few years ago, but in a much better spot than they were last year, where after Bosa went down, it was kind of a holy shit moment where they had nothing to work with. And, let's just start there. Getting him back, it's a huge deal. Now, I mean, this is his second ACL tear. It kind of runs in the family at this point, right? Like Joey would have had potentially a Ring of Honor or Hall of Fame level career if he didn't have the injuries he had. Now Nick Bosa keeps having this stuff. It's something to keep an eye on for sure. And I would at this point, unfortunately, say Nick Bosa is an injury-prone player. But all reports are the recovery's great. I think it was Trent Williams that said, like, you would never think this guy tore his ACL last year. So that's great to hear. And at least in the case of Nick Bosa, unlike his brother, Joey, it was like the more and more he got hurt, the more and more he regressed. Nick Bosa's been great every time he's come back from these injuries. So let's hope that's the case here, because when he's out there, this is a definitive defensive player of the year type of guy, a true, not just Batman, but tier 1 elite edge rusher. He plays both phases, run and pass. He's got power, he's got quickness, he's got bend. He has all of the pass rush tricks you look for in terms of swipes and different techniques. Doesn't always need it because the speed to power and the bend plays so well. But I've always been about as high on Nick Bosa as you could be. And I really hope he's back as his old self. But it is obviously going to be something you got to keep an eye on, is despite Trent Williams, words, let's make sure he is, good old Nick Bosa before we pencil him in as a game wrecker. But there's reason to believe that's going to happen. So huge deal with him coming back. Oh, and by the way, still might have managed to rack up the best defensive play of the season, even though he only played 3 games last year, where he walks the Seahawks right tackle into Sam Darnold for a game-winning strip sack with the right tackle's ass cheek. Pretty freaking nice. So that's your starting point. Now, as far as the position rankings go, they came out as my 18th ranked defensive line. Much better for pass rush, top 7th to 14th in a tier of really good pass rushes, largely because of Nick Bosa there. The D-line run defense is 30th to 32nd, though, so that's how that kind of meets in the middle a little bit more there. But obviously, you start with Nick Bosa and end as your 18th ranked overall defensive line. You've got some other question marks. I do want to go to Osa Odigizua next, because I think this was a really necessary addition of a relevant Robin type of piece to this pass rush, especially. I don't think Osa Odigizua is the best number 2 piece in the league, but he is absolutely good enough to be a number 2 piece that can fulfill that role, and you're happy with him as your number 2. He's a frustrating interior D lineman to block because he's short and quick and stout. He's got some power. He's good with his rips. He gets off blocks. He's excellent for loops and stunts. And, we'll get to the other side of the defensive line here. But I would imagine they're going to put Osa and Nick Bosa next to each other, and they're going to have a 2-man game with the stunts that they run here. And it's going to be really frustrating to deal with that. He is a little bit undersized, so the run defense comes and goes with him. I definitely think in a system like this, presumably, like we talked about, Chris Kachurik going to stay in that 4-2 Sala lighter style front that we've talked about. He can absolutely contribute to that style of approach up front. So this was an awesome addition, a necessary addition. You especially see, 7th to 14th pass rush. You're not quite in the glory days of those elite Niners D lines, but all right, you can work with that, especially compared to what they had last year. Now, you still would love for these other guys to step up, and they have lots of interesting pieces that hopefully can take steps up, but nothing proven, nothing you can count on, just guys they've kind of invested in here in recent drafts. And if any number of these other guys can step up, it's going to open up another form of upside here, because while you have a nice baseline with Osa and Bosa, nice, I just noticed that you can say that there. That's fun. But you can still slide and play, 3-on-2 with those two guys and handle the stunts, like focusing on those two guys and just beg anybody else to beat you right now. And until any of these other guys take a step forward, it's you're still going to be left with a little bit to be desired with the rest of this defensive line. But let's talk about if any of these other guys can step up in that sense. Mykel Williams, first round pick last year, coming off a torn ACL, so his recovery as well is going to be factored in as a potential question mark there. And his was a little bit later in the season, so we'll see just how much he hits the ground running. So that's kind of a required caveat. So many freaking injury conversations with this team. It's absurd. But he was never going to be great in year one. That would have been a real surprise based on his Georgia tape, where, he played a 4-eye technique where he was just asked to just throw his hands into the guy in front of him and play stout run defense. Very seldom was asked to do anything close to what he was actually going to do at the NFL as more of an edge player. So it was always going to be a projection kind of into more of that edge role. And sure enough, he had no idea how to rush the passer in the 8 weeks before he tears his ACL, and he still needs to learn how to do it. This was always going to be the big question on him, why he was potentially overdrafted a little bit, because, he's a good athlete, but I don't think you watched him. This wasn't like Trayvon Walker, for example, or some other guys where, they had no idea what they were doing in college, but you could at least see that he moves different as a big edge. Mykel's athletic, but he's not like a freak on tape as far as the movement and the burst. He's just good in that sense. So he's up against it to become a good pass rusher in the league. And honestly, I'm not really betting on him to be an impact this year as a rusher. I do think his run defense, where you don't even need to be particularly explosive if you're concerned about the ACL. Run defense is more about core strength and strength in your arms to get off blocks and IQ and tenacity than it is like getting off the ball and flying into guys. That still helps. But, I think as an impact as a run defender to set a hard edge and help you get to your third and pass situations where Bosa and Osa can tee off on guys, that can continue to take a step forward. And he was pretty good at it in his rookie year. So, he's got a long way to go to be worth the draft pick they spent on him. There's agility in there if it comes back to potentially have a little bit of a power to speed profile as a rusher to maybe slide inside a little bit as well. We're still learning a lot about how he's going to develop as a rusher with Chris Kachurik, who's one of the, probably the best D-line coach in the NFL. But we got a long way to go there. Let's stick with the edge. Your next best pass rusher after Bosa and Osa, I can't stop saying it now, Osa and Bosa is a better order, I think. But Keion White is a useful 4-eye designated pass rush specialist. They kind of got him for nothing. He's kind of a matchup type of rusher where if you have a unathletic guard, the Niners can isolate Keion White on him and he can kind of go to work. So in certain weeks, they'll get some big games out of him because he lines up, sometimes standing up, sometimes with his hand in the dirt. But he's got a cross-facing finesse rush that just works in between the tackles. He hasn't figured out the speed to power as an edge rusher. He hasn't really figured out speed to power as an interior rusher. The run defense is actually underwhelmed. I get why the Patriots moved off of him because he's at this point kind of a one-trick pony, but in the right matchups, that one trick is nice, but he'll kind of ebb and flow. You like him as more of a rotational hybrid piece than anything you're circling and counting on consistently. You got Sam Okwuegbunam, who's a thumper, 6'1", 265 pounds, like rotational defensive end, does a little bit of everything. He's fine in that role. That's okay. And then Romello Height is interesting. I think for, Raheem Morris and that Falcons pass rush that did a really good job taking athletes and manufacturing pressure off of twists and stunts and blitzes, he could have a really productive impact here, because the best thing I can say about Romello Height was it's incredible that it was clear to me that he had the best get off on his team when David Bailey was his teammate. Those two guys might have had the best first step get off of all edge rushers in this class together. And, he's undersized. He doesn't play the run. He doesn't have a lick of power. He's got the occasional rush move, but like he's not really a consistent winner as a pass rusher. It's just the threat of that speed and burst. But if you're saying, okay, it's 3rd and 10, Osa and Bosa are going to go to work one-on-one on one side, and then we're going to run like, okay, and let's bring Grayson Halton into the equation here too. But like Grayson Halton, Keon White, Mykel Williams, Romello Height, we're going to count on stunts and athleticism and scheme these guys up with the traits they have. That works for me. And I think we could see some real success there from those guys, but we got to see it all play out. That takes me to Grayson Halton, who was, him and Height are kind of spitting images of each other at different positions. Halton, undersized, no run defense, not a lot of like finesse to his game, but had an elite first step and is super athletic. So, I think the point is kind of made there. You get what you get in terms of athletic ability, and you can do some stuff with stunts to leverage that athleticism. Ideally, both Halton and Height learn how to defeat NFL linemen more consistently as one-on-one players. And in the case of Halton especially, with the lack of interior depth here, you want to see him do something as a run defender, whereas right now, if you see him on the field and I'm the offensive coordinator and I saw what I saw from his college tape, I'm running duo straight at Grayson Halton until you stop it, because he just cannot anchor. He will go 10 yards backwards against certain double teams at the NFL level. So that's a major concern, but third and pass situations, that'll be a fascinating combination. And then you do have CJ West. We haven't even talked about Alfred Collins. So like Alfred Collins and CJ West were their draft picks last year. Collins, you're going to circle as probably the leading snap getter here, 2nd round pick, bigger bodied guy. He profiles as more of your true nose tackle size on the interior, because it's obviously not Osa, it's not Halton. We'll talk about CJ West. They need a big step from Alfred Collins, especially as a run defender. There were flashes. He's got strong arms. He can get off blocks. He had that big highlight play where he punches a ball out at the goal line. I think it was that against the Rams? It was a primetime game. There's something in there as a run defender, but he's tall and he's not strong enough yet to dominate at his height, especially when he's got to improve his pad level. He just, as far as him being your best interior run defender right now, from a traditional standpoint, like Osa can do some stuff for sure with his athleticism, but I mean, the Niners came out tied for worst in D-line run defense. They don't have stout run defenders, and I'm worried about this being a very matchup dependent unit and certain offensive lines. And we've seen the NFL trend towards more size, more mass, and inside running. Going right at these guys could be a real issue. So you want to see Alfred Collins take a big step there, and that's where I'm focusing on him with his development. Like, the pass rush is pretty far away from him too, and he's not very twitchy and athletic to project as much of a pass rusher anyway. So we'll see what kind of step he takes. And then CJ West as well was a good use of a 4th round pick, showed promise in year 1. He's interesting because his Indiana tape, he just kind of was a stout, squatty nose tackle type, and then he tests really well and shows that he's got, some explosiveness in there. And I thought his tape with the Niners actually showed someone that can penetrate a little bit and get off the ball and get on top of blocks a little bit more. but also wasn't as stout and disciplined as a run defender. So you got a little bit of a trade-off there, but we've seen kind of two different versions of him, and he's young and developing. He's another guy with that green up arrow on him. So, like, okay, you've got Michael Williams, first round pick, Alfred Collins, second round pick, Romello Height, third round pick, CJ West, Grayson Halton, fourth round picks in the last 2 years. And you can even put Keon White in the mix there as someone they traded for. Obviously, Osa they traded for as well. But especially those young players, 5 green up arrows there. Who starts to make an impact here? Who develops? Do all 5 of these guys click at the same time? There's potential here, but that's all it is right now, is potential. So that's what's driving this overall defensive line ranking down right now. But there's a chance where things really click, and this is more of a top 10 defensive line, and you can really start to be in business. But in this series, we're ranking teams and players off of proven commodities and at their floor heading into the year. Obviously, it's a little bit of an anchor at the moment until we see more from these guys. So there's your Niners defensive line, better than last year for sure, and I think can be good enough to, like effectively, okay, we got the 6th ranked offense. We're essentially looking at this defense that was horrible last year, even with Robert Saleh, and saying, can we get enough without Robert Saleh to just keep this team in games for this offense? And they won a lot of games. It's not like they were a bad team last year, but we're trying to get to Super Bowl contention. Can we make this an okay defense so that the offense can be the star of the show here? That's the goal. I think the defensive line is already in a place where that can be yes, but eventually you want it to be even more than that. But let's go to linebacker, and it's kind of a continuation of some of the conversations we've had here, where you, number one, get an injured superstar back healthy in Fred Warner. That alone is going to make you upgraded at linebacker. He goes down quarter of the way through the year, so that speaks for itself. But also a continuation of like, all right, we're going to trade away a ascending young player who played every single snap last year in D winners, and bring in Dre Greenlaw because we love Dre Greenlaw. Do we care that he's been massively injured over the last 2 years and the Broncos, who need linebacker help, released him? No, we don't care. It's just arrogant, man. But it's fun that he's back and he's healthy currently, so that's cool. They also lose Curtis Robinson and draft Jaden Duggar in the 5th round. But they are upgraded at linebacker, so we continue to trend in the right direction with this roster on defense. I mean, Fred Warner, I feel like everybody knows at this point, especially as Roquan has taken a step back. But even when Roquan was LB2 in the league, it should have still been clear that Fred Warner was even a cut above that. I mean, he is a all-time talent at the linebacker position. Every box is checked. The way he processes information, the instincts he has, his turnover instincts to punch the ball out, to convert interceptions, all combines with a player that has length, enough size, very good athletic traits. He's one of the best players in the NFL. He goes down, and it completely changed the dynamic of their defense, and he's back. And it was like, what was it, a broken ankle? Like, I don't think there's really injury concerns here either. So this is colossal to get him back. And I think that speaks for itself, and I don't know that we need to have much of a longer conversation than that. Now, okay, we're going Dre Greenlaw again at LB2. And I love Dre Greenlaw. When these guys are healthy, I think this is clearly the best linebacker duo in the NFL. And if they manage to finagle this thing, I mean, we're right back walking that tightrope on a razor's edge. If Dre Greenlaw stays healthy, and it's not like he was bad when he played for the Broncos last year. That wasn't the problem. It's just he got hurt again. And the lower body right now is really a red flag. Like he gets the Achilles injury in the Super Bowl, misses most of the next season, signs with Denver, tears his quad very early in their camp. In September, he aggravated that injury, eventually came back, and then his hamstring started acting up. So to me, it's like everything with his lower body is pushing and pulling and potentially overreacting. He's getting older. It's not working there. So it's a major concern it seems incredibly unlikely that he's going to be here all season for this team. But it sure as hell is fun that he's back, and it looks great here in August. That's for damn sure. And on the field, he's got balance. He's a great run defender, great coverage player, speed, enough size. Not to go overkill with the Batman and Robin thing here, but that's really what this feels like in terms of linebacker tandems. So that's great. But baking in the injury concern on him, it drops the Niners linebacker room all the way down to second. They are first in coverage because Fred is just that much better than any other linebacker in the NFL from a coverage standpoint. The linebacker run defense grade is 6th to 9th. But yeah, second for overall linebacker duo, and would undoubtedly be number one if you could promise me Dre Greenlaw plays all year. I respect the risk, but you add it. It's kind of like their draft philosophy, right? Like, it's okay to take the occasional injury risk on a guy here or a guy there. To do it like 7 different times in the same offseason, it's crazy. It's like reaching on picks every single year. It's just unlikely to work out for you every year. But the upside is phenomenal. They do have some depth. Like Tatum Bethune had to play last year and looked all right. I mean, I wouldn't have traded away D Winters. I just wouldn't. I'm cool with signing Dre Greenlaw, but I wouldn't have traded away D Winters. He looked really good. But Tatum Bethune was his running man next to him. He looks all right. You know, he flies around and is getting better as a 7th round pick coming into the league. They're hoping Nick Martin takes a step as a way overdrafted 3rd round pick last year, but he can run. If you're coaching him up and getting him into the scheme, like maybe he can develop there. I like the Jaden Duggar pick in the 5th round. I do. He was a really fun prospect. Newer to football. No relation to Kyle Duggar, by the way. But he's a 6'5" linebacker with crazy wingspan. I think he's got like almost 36-inch arms. But he's pretty nasty against the run. He's stiff as a board. So the coverage is always going to be an issue for him, but he's a fascinating player. I'm curious if he works out. I like the flyer on outliers on day 3, and he was an outlier with his unique skills and length and playing at a lower level of competition and being pretty new to football. He's fascinating. But yeah, as long as Fred stays healthy, they're going to be just fine at linebacker. They are. You obviously end up with some more questions if it's Tatum Bethune or Nick Martin in there, if and when Dre Greenlaw gets hurt. But yeah, like I've said enough at this point, this could be special if Greenlaw stays healthy. And Greenlaw's only 29 years old. It's not like he's ancient. It's just the body's breaking down for him. So they've upgraded pretty significantly in their front 6. The secondary now, less in terms of upgrades, but still not worse. Like I said, slightly upgraded at cornerback and neutral at safety. So at corner, they don't lose anybody, and they added a bunch of depth. Nate Hobbs, who didn't work out as a signing for Green Bay, but I like him as a bounce back candidate, as depth at least. Jack Jones also, like, as far as depth is concerned, it's a nice piece. You don't really want him starting. We can talk more about those 2 guys in a minute. And then they do also add a very fascinating 4th round pick, Ephesians Prysock. All 3 of these guys come in. None of them are being asked to start. You all of a sudden have one of the deeper cornerback rooms in the league, in my opinion. And then at safety, staying neutral, they lose Jason Pinnock and add Ashton Davis. Just a swap of some journeyman veterans at this point. But let's break down this secondary. It is not the highest ranking unit for me. It's not. They come in as my 27th to 28th ranked secondary. Their floor is okay in terms of like positional width. They don't have a definitive liability necessarily, but they are missing a definitive strength here. This is about as close to the bottom of the league in terms of like surviving at secondary. So your cornerbacks are Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, and Upton Stout. Lenore is a nice player who realistically should probably be a CB2. He's got decent size. He's got decent man ability, decent zone ability. His run defense has tapered off in the last couple of years for one reason or another. His missed tackle rate has come down. He hasn't been as involved against the run. He hasn't been in the slot quite as much either, so that could play a factor. But he's a very solid starting corner. It's just one of these players that Ideally, he'd be your number 2, and you got to ask him to be your number 1. Then you have Renardo Green, who actually gets the yellow arrow for me. We talk a lot about the yellow arrow, could go up, could go down for players that kind of have, fascinating career trajectories. The year 3 players can be yellow arrow players in the sense that year 1 was much better than year 2, and now heading into year 3, which version do we get where we maybe don't fully know who the player is yet? That's Renardo Green. Year 1 as a press jam corner, you saw all the things you liked about him as a second-round pick, and you assumed it would only go up from there. Year 2, he got picked on much more. And you were reminded a little bit like, oh yeah, this guy wasn't really a special athlete, and his margin for error at the next level is a lot less. So I give him a 76 rating here. I think he played above that as a rookie, at least slightly above it. And he played a little bit worse than that last year. So where does he land here? The worst case is you look at a player that had a fairly similar profile in Martin Emerson for the Browns, who tapered off basically into irrelevancy by year 3 or year 4. That's worst case. I'm not predicting that with Renardo Green, but it does kind of creep into my mind a little bit. The best case is he turns it back around and this is their type, and maybe he can be more of a CB1 for them, especially if you have a better pass rush and you can get him back in guys' face a little bit more. And, if you're playing press jam coverage and you're not the fastest, quickest guy like Renardo Green, it's a big difference between having to cover for 2.5 seconds compared to 4 seconds like he did last year. So that seems reasonable, that the pass rush gets better and Renardo Green's skill set plays a lot better. And I would definitely lean more towards the up arrow on him. But he was a pretty, replacement level dude last year. Not really much to write home about with his sophomore year tape. And then he got Upton Stout in the slot. Fascinating player who has been way better than I thought he would be. His tape at Western Kentucky was a ton of fun, but I was just like, is this going to work? He's 5'8", played at Western Kentucky. Is this going to translate into the modern NFL, especially from a run defense standpoint where the league is trending towards getting big in the nickel, not more of these traditional undersized nickels. So I worried that it was a little bit against kind of the trend of the NFL. But he made it work in his rookie season last year. At first, the coverage was a big issue for him, but as the year went on, he started allowing less and less underneath and started to rack up some pass breakups too. Just 6 passes defended on the year, 73% reception allowed, 612 yards allowed. We're not talking about a lockdown slot corner at this point, but you definitely like the fact that he was better in the second half compared to the first half. And where he really impressed me was only missing 13% of his tackles. That's not elite, but it's not liability territory. Anything over 15% is acceptable from a slot corner, and he was within range of that. So at his size, I'm going to take that. When he is frisky and he's compact, he's got some play strength, he's quick to get around blocks. This is more of your traditional scrappy slot corner, but he's shown that can still play at the next level, and I think he'll continue to get better as he did within his rookie season. I'm not going to say he's got superstar upside or anything like that, but looking like a potential hit for the Niners with the 100th pick in the draft. And then I mentioned their cornerback room is probably one of the deepest in the league. Nate Hobbs, I liked him as a Raider. He's got inside-out flexibility. Weird year with the Packers. Really weird year where he missed a lot of time with injuries, was in and out of the lineup. When he played, was a part of the problem. He couldn't find the ball. He was giving things up, was just almost like, I don't want to make any assumptions, but he felt like a player that got his money and checked out. And I don't know that defensive staff really embraced him either and gave him a chance to get some of that confidence back. I'm just saying what his tape represented, not necessarily what his motivations are. I don't want to jump to any conclusions in that sense. I'm just trying to describe what it looked like and how weird the year was. So we'll see kind of where he lands here in San Francisco. But this to me is like, okay, obviously Green Bay overpaid for him and you don't want to, cash out to make him a starter for you. But if you can buy low as a like sixth man of the year type for your secondary, where he can play slot, he can play outside, he can do a little man, can do a little zone. That's what he was with the Raiders as a day 3 pick before he ever got money. So if you get something closer to Raiders Nate Hobbs, that's a really nice signing. Jack Jones is a ball hawking, undersized, like boom or bust corner. That's the best way I can describe him. You do not want him in the starting lineup. You're going to end up with way more bad weeks than good weeks. But if you have to start him, you pray that he, reads the quarterback and makes a play for you in addition to giving up 4 receptions. And that ends up being a pretty productive week for him. But as a CB5, okay, I can live with that. And then Ephesians Prysock, I liked a lot more than his teammate that went around earlier to the Bengals. I'm just going to say this. Shades of Zion McCollum with all the traits and a lot of these tall, long corners that test super well, like his teammate Takario Davis. They test really well, but you load up the tape and you're like, yeah, that's not going to work. That dude is stiff as a freaking board. He can't turn his hips. He can't pick up his feet. You can't have that at cornerback. Prysock, that was not the case. You can see the fluid hips, the quick feet. The physical tools are special with this guy. Does the mental stuff click up? That's what you need. But I love the use of a 4th round pick on him. And if he works out, I will not be surprised. It's not a guarantee. It's not like he had great college tape or anything like that. But it's a tools-based position if you're hunting upside, and he's got that part figured out. I think that's probably your 6 corners. Darrell Luter has been rough for this team, who they drafted a few years ago. Ciaran Neal is kind of a safety, big nickel hybrid. If Nate Hobbs is hurt, you might end up with Ciaran Neal off the practice squad as a backup nickel. But you also have Diamador Lenore for that too, so I don't know that he makes it. And then you have a very standard baseline with your safety room currently. Jair Brown, especially, I think he is what he is. He's maxed out he's smaller. He's not that fast, but he's pretty smart. He's a decent run defender in terms of effort. His missed tackle rate's lower than you would like. He's in a contract year. We'll see if the Niners pay him. I've been waiting for them to kind of upgrade over him for a while, and they just haven't done it. He's not going to murder your defense, but he is going to take his losses, and he sure as hell isn't going to really elevate anything here. Malik Mustafa does get the up arrow for me. I think you can look at him heading into year 3 as a prospect that I loved for this team. I kind of predicted he would be their next Talanoa Hufanga, and it hasn't quite been there yet. We've seen a lot of the flashes that can explain why I was so excited about this player, who was tied with Tyke Smith for my best safety in that draft class coming out. I mean, you talk about hit power as a trait and wanting to be an enforcer from the back end. There are very few players in the NFL that I would list before Malik Mustafa in that category. He's got underrated speed from the back end in a straight line, and he has some moments patrolling the back end in coverage that show that he can be a little bit better there. He's very week to week. He's had some rough moments in coverage with coverage busts and not seeing things on time. And also, even if he's a massive enforcer from the back end, he has got to get better at the angles he takes and missing tackles. You don't want a player like this to be sitting here after year 2 with a B- run defense grade. He has like A potential as a run defender. So we'll see if he can take those steps. I think, last year he was coming off of, I think it was an ACL, but he got hurt very late in his rookie season and wasn't able to get back out there till late in his year 2, or at least midway through year 2. So didn't have a full camp last year. I think if he doesn't take a step this year, we'll stop saying he's going to be anything more than this, but I think there's reason to believe he can definitely continue to break through here in year 3. And then you have Ashton Davis, journeyman, who just things haven't clicked for him. He's got speed and theoretical coverage ability on the back end, but it hasn't been consistent. His run defense has been very streaky, but he's kind of your swap for what Jason Pinnock was for you as a backup safety. That's fair game. And then Marcus Siegel was tough to watch, man. He ended up getting benched last year. I don't think he's a safety. I really don't. He played slot at Kansas State. He's got that straight line man coverage skill set, but on the back end, man, busted coverage, lack of anticipation. If you want to know why speed can be overrated at safety, if you don't have the mental understanding of what you're looking for back there, load up Marcus Siegel tape early in the season. You'll understand why speed can only take you so far. So, yeah, he's got everything to prove. Like, I really think he should be a slot corner. But that's your safety depth. Not really much going on after that. Patrick McMorris was a 7th round pick by the Dolphins a couple years ago, has hardly played, and a couple of undrafted dudes. So yeah, there's some potential here, right? If you hit all your green lights with Mustafa, Green, and Stout, it can be better. I don't know that the upside is outrageous here. I don't. But it can definitely be better. And Prysock too, but that's probably more of a 2027 and beyond thing if you're realistic. But yeah, they're kind of dragging this defense back a little bit right now, and that's not a huge surprise. It's not a highly considered, highly perceived secondary by most people. But as we tie this whole defense together here, with all the question marks here, and I don't think there's quite as many question marks with the defense as we had with the offense, but there's still a wide range of outcomes here with a polarizing unit. They came out as my 19th defense heading into the year, and I think it could swing 10 spots in either direction. I really do. I mean, in a best case scenario, Bosa looks great. Some of the young players on the D-line step up. Dre Greenlaw manages to stay healthy, and maybe a couple pieces in the secondary get a little bit better. I see a top 10 defense there, but maybe Bosa is not exactly what you need him to be. The young D-line guys don't take a step forward. Greenlaw gets hurt, and you have a pretty bad secondary. And this year you don't have Robert Saleh to elevate that. You're still probably in a better spot because you have Fred Warner in there, but that's pushing bottom 5 for a defense if you get all your red lights here. So volatility galore with the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to start to wrap this thing up. We do got to talk a little special teams here. We'll take a look at how the Niners came out in my special teams formula. So PFF really liked their success rate last year, as did our new friend of the channel, Aaron Schatz, over at DVOA. So they were 6th in PFF and 13th in DVOA special teams grade last year. Pretty average with their kicker and punter grades with Eddie Pinheiro and now Corliss Waitman, who gets added to the mix here, by the way, as they say goodbye to Thomas Morstead at punter. And then also at returner, Sky Moore, no longer with the team. But Jacob Cowing is coming back from injury there, and it's not like he was good as a rookie, and they rank pretty low for returner, actually tied for worst in the league for the return game. Maybe some upside there with Jacob Cowing, but not the best projection necessarily with the returner. But they did come out, largely thanks to those PFF and DVOA team grades from last year, 13th in special teams, which is better than not coming out 13th, I guess. I know the Niners have had some issues on special teams, so we'll see how they land there. But this will be fun. Let's look at the Niners Venn diagram of strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors. And it's actually a pretty even distribution. I've got 4 definitive strengths, 3 definitive weaknesses, and 4 critical wildcard pivotal factors for this team. Their strengths to me: offensive coaching under Kyle Shanahan, that speaks for itself. Run blocking. Pass rush did crack a strength. They were tied for 7th, so inside the top 10, we'll call that a strength, even if D-line does show up as a wild card with all the youth there. And then linebacker is a strength. I mean, even Fred Warner plus an okay backup is still a top 5 to 10 linebacker tandem in the league. And there's a chance that Dre Greenlaw stays healthy. That's why linebacker also shows up as a wild card, though, because of Dre Greenlaw's health. I mean, yeah, if Greenlaw gets hurt, you're still sitting in a good spot at linebacker. But if he stays healthy, you have the best linebacker tandem in the league. So there's a gap between being 1 and 7, so to speak. But you do have some more definitive weaknesses with the D-line run defense. They're very thin and unproven up front, especially between the tackles. Their secondary did come in the bottom 8 of the league. It's just not the best looking unit. And the upside there is just okay. And then, not even joking, age and durability projects as a weakness for this team. Does it show up to hurt them? Maybe not. But I mean, injuries have certainly hurt this team in recent years. And it's not like these guys are getting any younger or more durable. So how could that not show up in the weaknesses category for the Niners? But the remaining wildcard pivotal factors are going to be running back between Christian McCaffrey's potential regression and those 2 young unproven backs. And oh yeah, there's that weapons conversation. I mean, it's like a freaking Twister movie with all the moving pieces and age and injuries and guys in, guys out. It's crazy. You can pretty easily understand these guys' skill set, understand how it could be a strength for this team, but it sure as hell isn't hard to see how this ends up going the wrong way and hurting this team too, if guys start dropping like flies, as we've seen for the Niners in the past. You add up all those wild cards together, and yes, this is a volatile 49ers football team. But let's get into predictions territory for the Niners. What do I actually think happens for this team that I ranked 11th heading into the year? We'll start by looking at their schedule here, and it's a gauntlet, man, especially down the stretch. And I guess that worries me. If you are talking about this team getting banged up as the year goes on, a bunch of durability questions as injury exposure racks up and fatigue and wear and tear settles in, it's not great that the hardest part of your schedule is the last 2 months. I mean, you look at that week 12 on, I mean, even starting week 10, you got at Dallas, Minnesota in Mexico City, losing a home game there. Then you got Seattle at home. You do go to the Giants, but then you come right back home and play the Rams, at the Chargers, probably a home game for the Niners, at the Chiefs, the Eagles, week 17. Like, okay, better hope you're healthy. At least you get to end at Arizona. But the second half of their schedule is very, very hard. The first half is much more favorable. I mean, you do start at the Rams, and I will say this, I am so thankful that we get to watch both these teams largely healthy week 1. We'll obviously see how camp plays out. There's a few weeks to go, knock on wood. But I'm going to at least enjoy the week 1 49ers, man, knowing what could come down the road. Because if you could promise me a full bill of health for this Niners team, this is a top 5 football team, in my opinion. But you just can't do that. You have to account for all of the different durability questions. But week 1, a game in Australia, what is that, the second game of the year? Friday night, I think? That's a clash of titans, man. I'm excited as hell for that matchup. That's going to be fun. Still a super challenging game, though. The Rams, I mean, if ever there was a year where you didn't need me to spoil who the number 1 team was, I mean, come on now. But yeah, you've got, in that first half of the season, you've got Miami, Arizona, Raiders, Commanders at home. You have at Atlanta in there as well. Those should all be wins for the Niners, especially if they're still pretty healthy. So you should start pretty strong here. You also have Denver and at Seattle week 4, week 5. Those are challenging games. Can you get one between Denver, at Seattle, and against the Rams and win the rest of those? So you're starting the year 6-2, heading into the home stretch there. That feels realistic. It's just, how do you finish after that point? So it's an interesting schedule, how things played out for them. I ultimately went with a 10-win prediction on the Niners. I think, gun to my head, if I got to predict how this season goes, I do think they start strong. Injuries start to pile up. And as we've seen, they're a lesser version of themselves as you get down the stretch, and you've got that challenging stretch of games down the stretch. How many times can we say stretch? Stretch. All right, I'm getting crazy. That's just like all right, I got to make a prediction here. What's the most likely outcome? That's that. You obviously have a best case outcome here where everybody stays healthy, in which case I think this team can be right there with all the Super Bowl contenders. I mean, the Rams are in a unique category this year, but competing in this division, absolutely. Or you have a worst case scenario where the injuries pile up quicker, and that's why their floor is lower than some of these teams around them with a 7-win floor. But yeah, I think the ceiling with a challenging schedule is about 12 wins. My prediction was 10. So that's where I landed on this team. I don't hate 18-1 on the Super Bowl. If you were a Niners fan waiting for me to convince you to not bet on your team to win the Super Bowl, I'm not going to tell you not to, just because I think the upside's there, and that's consistent with my ranking of this team, right? 10th to 11th, I got them 11th. So the math is math in there. If you want to buy into the Niners, I get it. I really do. So let's finish with my superlative awards for San Francisco here. So for team MVP, I'm going to go with Nick Bosa. I think getting that elite edge player into the mix, you have Fred Warner is the best linebacker in the NFL, but the way an edge rusher can change a defense is different from a linebacker, even Fred Warner. But either one of those, you could pick and I'd be cool with. For the biggest wild card, I just put the whole freaking offense with health and age. Just pick one. Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans, George Kittle. I guess Debo gets his name in there, and Trent Williams. That's a crazy list of all the things we're talking about with age, durability, and regression risk. That's the wild card, is where does that list of names land in the year 2026? Breakout offense, harder to pick on a team that most of these guys have already broken out, but I went with Jordan James. If I'm saying Christian McCaffrey is either either the Niners are going to be smart about it and not give him 500 touches, or he's going to get hurt. That's the likely outcome in my mind. I think Jordan James, as the RB2, has a chance to look pretty good here and be a decent, something like what Devin Singletary was in his prime, where the backup running back comes into the game and allows you to do what you want to do and you feel pretty good about it. Sure, I would consider that a breakout for Jordan James. Breakout defense, I'm going to go with Malik Mustafa here. We just talked about him, but with a better run of health here, a player that I really do like his playmaking ability, especially the enforcer mentality that he brings. Unsung hero was a tough one because there's so many big names on this team. I'm going to go with Brock Purdy, though. I don't know if where I ranked him is going to be higher than consensus. I think it just depends who you ask. But he's a good quarterback, man. And all these other big names get all the credit. Shanahan gets all the credit. Brock Purdy's a pretty effing important part of this too. And we're going to take this as an opportunity to give him a little bit of love, call him a little underrated, a little bit of an unsung hero. It could be a big story of this team this year too. Fantasy MVP, we're going to finish here with George Kittle. It's a roll of the dice with all these guys. It's not going to be Christian McCaffrey for me. I, in fact, think I'm staying away from him in fantasy. But yeah, how the pass catchers are going to land is damn near impossible. But of all those guys, I guess my gut tells me, and these are more like, what are you actually predicting? My gut tells me George Kittle's going to be all right. And he's, as guys are getting injured and you're trying to figure out everything else moving around him with different pieces, I think George Kittle's going to be the mainstay there and be really productive, 1,000-yard season, awesome year. And, he's going as tight end 11 right now. That's low. Him being a top 5 tight end feels pretty safe for me. So we're going to go George Kittle for fantasy MVP. But that's going to do it for your Niners deep dive. Don't tell me how you think this team's season is going to go. Flip a coin and tell me how it landed, because that's what's going to decide if the Niners can get through this season. It's that type of team, man. We know the upside is here. It's a fascinating, fascinating team. Excited to see how this goes for this squad. I love so many players on this team. Would love to see them, honestly, get the ultimate goal in the end of things. Is it going to happen? Again, maybe flip a coin. on that one. But hope you enjoyed. Please do hit that like button on the way out. I really do appreciate it. And let me know who you think comes next. Now inside the top 10 of these power rankings. Home stretch time is here. Hope you guys are enjoying the series and enjoyed today's deep dive. I'll see you soon. Cheers.